Welcome. My name is Patrick Curran, and along with my friend Greg Hancock, we make up Quantitude. We're a podcast dedicated to all things quantitative, ranging from the relevant to the completely irrelevant. In today's episode, we talk about statistical power. We also discuss my mom, 11-year-old saxophone players, child labor laws, vision and pigs, the poop emoji, and we use the word persnickety. We hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome, Greg. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
I am fine. I found this nice quiet office to sit in, and then mere minutes ago they started leaf blowing right outside the window, and I think they have moved on. So
you're not using the Quantitude studio that we have?
I am not using the Quantitude studio because evidently it got backed up and they need to call the plumber to get that repaired. And so that's
okay.
That's
and the
not
echo
going to
in
be
there.
available.
The echo is just brutal.
A couple hours in. I was the last one to use it, and so I'd rather avoid that for a couple of days. So no, I am actually sitting in another faculty member's office because I have the master key and it's summer and the building is abandoned. And so as long as they don't come in, I think we're fine. Now, how about you?
And that's pretty safe.
Yeah.
That's pretty safe because faculty don't come in during the summer.
Which actually is a segue to this very podcast because kind of you and I have months of seemingly empty time, and this seemed like a good thing to do.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm supposed to be working on a grant, but whatever.
I have two that are half written. And so jointly, in the aggregate, I have a grant written.
Nicely
I wrote
done.
an entire R01. The problem is it's just they're two halves of different projects.
That's fine. Just get a no-cost extension. You're good.
Don't you have to get a cost extension first before you get a no-cost extension?
I don't know. I get all my work done on time, Patrick.
Well, I'll add that to the list of things that are different between me and you.
Okay.
By the way, I was totally into the intro music, which for listeners, and I'm taking the plural in that with somewhat of a grain of salt. Hi, Mom.
Wow. Hey, Mrs. C.
We are on a low budget outfit here, particularly if zero reflects a low budget. But listeners out there, is that musical jazz interlude was Tate's son. Tate's son is Greg's son Tate. Excuse me.
Do you want to just take that again?
No, let's just leave it. What the hell do I care? No one is listening to this.
Okay.
It's Greg's son Tate who recorded that into an iPhone, and so it's totally cool, and we like that.
Yeah, I had him in his bedroom playing for an hour or so, trying to get something out. So we hope you like that. And you get what you pay for, I think. And I assume your children have talents that you can share?
Carried on their mother's genetic side, yes. Thank goodness.
Yeah, no, obviously.
Yeah. And so as the podcasts unfold, we will loop them in. I have one who is a bit more drama-oriented, and so maybe I could have her dramatically read article reviews of mine that I've gotten. That would be entertaining.
Ooh,
and
I like
the
that.
other one is a piano player, so maybe we can get some Johnson Rag slide piano occasionally.
I like that.
Anything to avoid having to pay copyright. It turns out that doing podcasts where you steal music is frowned upon.
And child labor laws are very loopholey when it comes to your own children.
Yeah, it's a learning experience. It's a teachable moment.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too. So should we move to the figurative mailbag? Because we don't really have a mailbag.
Simulated mailbag?
An e-bag. E-bag. Sounds vaguely inappropriate, but we'll just go with that. All right, so I have a note here from Chicago. Who is this? It's Elwood at University of Chicago. And he submitted a manuscript in which he had a 3-part study. And part 1 and part 3, there were significant findings. And part 2, there was a non-significant finding. And he got an R and R, but there was a very persnickety reviewer who is requiring that he do a post hoc power analysis to help understand the non-significant finding. And Elwood is a little perplexed by this and wonders if we can help him understand what is post hoc power analysis and is there any real utility to that in a revision of a manuscript. So what are your thoughts on that? Just throwing it back to you.
Wow, there's a lot going on there. Let's start with maybe just a little bit about power so that we know that both of the people listening, hey, Mrs. C, so that your mom understands what power is and what the situation is that Elwood is in. So power, and feel free to jump in and correct me as we go. Not that I need to tell you that. Power is the probability of finding something when there's something to be found. And when you're doing a study, why would you do a study if you didn't have a good shot of being able to find the thing that you're looking for, assuming it's there in the first place? And so in this case, it sounds like Elwood didn't find anything, and the reviewer wants to know, well, did you have enough power? Does that sound right?
That's how I read the note. Is
okay.
If he didn't, now I'm reading between the lines, but if he didn't find an effect, it might be because he has low power.
Okay. It might also be, and you can't rule this out, that there's nothing to find. And I think one of the problems with power analysis, and I'm sure knowing you and knowing me, we're going to uncover a few of them. But one of the problems with power analysis is it sort of hinges on hopes and dreams and beliefs and thinking you know what's true. And in this case, the assumption that the reviewer is making is that there is something to find, and there may not be something to find. So first step is, is acknowledging that there might be nothing to see here. Drive on. So if there is something to see, the reviewer is saying, all right, tell me about the post hoc power. So post hoc power is going to be when the study is done and you want to do an assessment to estimate how much power you had to try and find the thing. The problem is you didn't find the thing. And so in a post hoc power analysis, who's going to do it when they find something, right? I didn't hear a reviewer 2 saying, what about study 1 and study 3? So reviewer 2 is only saying to do that in the second study. So if you want to do a power analysis, what are some of the things that you need to do a power analysis? When you do a power analysis, what are some of the things that you specify?
Okay, so feels a little bit like doctoral exams here, so I will give a run at it. Mm-hmm. So an inferential test, and correct me if I'm wrong, an inferential test is entirely determined. Okay. I'm talking here. I'm talking 4 components: sample size, type 1 error rate, alpha, effect size, and then your power. And those 4 are integrally related, in which if you have any 3, the 4th is determined. So for a given effect size, a given alpha level, and a given sample size, there's some level of power. So if you have 100 subjects, you have a type 1 alpha rate of 0.5, you have an effect size of, say, 0.2, some medium effect size, then there's going to be some level of power that's associated with it. So say 0.75, and what it literally means is that alpha and that sample size and that effect size, you have a 75% chance of finding that effect if that effect truly exists. Is that a fair description of that?
Yeah, I would just add some of the legal fine print, and that is assuming that you have met all of the assumptions that are underlying the test that you're conducting.
Good.
So they may or may not have any huge effect, but maybe they will. So if you have non-normality, depends on what you're testing. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. If you have, if you violate the assumption of independence of observations, if you have some really some high intra-class correlation, if we want to say that, that could cause problems potentially. So I'm going to assume that every single planet has aligned for you, and then I'm buying into you got to have 3 of the 4. I'm with you.
Okay.
All right. And Jupiter has to be in retrograde, I think,
which it is. I checked this morning, so Excellent. We're cool on that.
Okay. Right. So one of the other things that you said in your list was you said an effect size. And the an effect size thing assumes that whatever it is you're looking for is characterized by a single effect. And when you said, for example, I don't remember if you said delta or D, but that's for a very specific type of test that you might be conducting. I don't know if Elwood's doing a regression or a larger model, or I have no idea what the analysis is. And that becomes relevant here too, I would say. All right. So back to the issue, and this is going to reflect my particular bias about post hoc power analysis, and that is, I think it's useless. So I'm just not going to candy coat it. I think post hoc power analysis is useless. Before I go further, do you want to challenge that?
Could I add a corollary to it?
Oh God, corollary. All right. How about a lemma? Can you add
I will
a lemma?
do a lemma. QED.
ED.
I think all power analysis is useless.
Ooh.
So why don't you make a run at why you think post hoc power analysis is useless, and I will expand that to all power analysis.
Hang on. Whew. All right. That was a pretty bold statement, my friend. All right, sure. At post hoc power analysis. So my beef, and I just want to fast forward through this because I can't wait to hear what you have to say. It was very provocative, and I'm unused to you saying things that are going to engage me. So anyway, let me just get my bearings. Post hoc power analysis. Here's the thing. If you didn't find something, it means that if you do a post hoc estimate of the effect size that's necessary to do the power analysis, it's going to wind up putting you on the downside of power. Those two things are not independent of each other. And you will, as the methodological literature talks about, you will likely get an underestimate of the effect size anyway, because you wouldn't have been asking the question about power had you rejected. So I think it's useless, and I think it's also tied to a particular mindset, and that is that in post hoc power analysis, you are either celebrating that you found something, which is not the case for Elwood, or you're whining about not finding something that you still think is there. And for me, the whole exercise then becomes kind of moot. You will find that you didn't have enough power because you didn't find something. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Do you have anything that you want to add to that before we dig into your thing? your upstaging comment? Go ahead.
No, I totally agree, because going back to your assumptions and meeting assumptions, another one to add, and it taps into something that I would argue all the time with a buddy of mine back in grad school, is he made the argument that if you had a significant effect, no matter how small the sample size, then you have sufficient power for the test. And I found it an intriguing argument for two reasons, because there's kind of a pro and a con. The pro is given the four interlocking pieces that determine an inferential test, is if you have a significant effect, then you have a large enough effect size to distinguish that from sampling variability when testing the null hypothesis. But what my thought experiment is even at smaller n, you're much more at risk for influential observations, outliers, things like that. And so you could literally have 19 scores that are 0 and have one that's 4 standard deviations away from the mean, and then you get a significant effect on what is functionally a 0 effect size, because you are at such risk for influential observations in small n. And so I'm totally with you. Is the mic drop is exactly where I am as well, is you have sufficient power if you have a significant p, and you have insufficient power if you have a non-significant p, because all of these things are interlinking. Let me go to my admittedly somewhat hyperbolically stated, I think all power is useless, although not entire hyperbolically, is if you teleport back to Cohen. All right, so Jacob Cohen, 1960s, he's doing amazing stuff. And in the late 60s, he really starts working on power analysis. And that was unambiguously useful, at least in my eyes. You have two groups. All right, you have a treatment group, you have a control group, you have a mean difference, you have some pooled standard deviation, right? We all learned this in undergrad stat. And there's, in its simplest form, a t-test. And you want to know, going into the study, what is the probability that I'm going to be able to distinguish these two groups if these two groups really are different in the population? And if you go into a study like that and your power is 0.2 or 0.3, which unfortunately is what a lot of psychology is, and social sciences, and he has several very important papers over the years in highlighting that, median power of published studies is something like, 0.3, 0.35, that's a horrible thing to think about, is when you talk to a graduate student and you say, okay, even if your theory is right? It's a conditional probability, is even assuming that your treatment is beneficial, you only have a 1 in 3 chance of finding a significant effect. So that is important. All right, now teleport forward, though, 30 years after Cohen, where we are now. And so we have multiple indicator latent factors. We have time nested within kids and kids nested within schools. We have multivariate growth models, and we have all these amazing things that we couldn't have even dreamed about in the 70s and 80s. And you write an NIH R01 application and you have a mandatory paragraph that you say, what is the power of your study? And all I can think of, and I work with colleagues where I help write these paragraphs, and all I can think of is the power of what? Right? As Cohen was, he could unambiguously say it's the power of distinguishing two groups when compared to one another. But if I have a growth model where there's individual variability in trajectories of anxiety, there's individual variabilities in trajectories of alcohol use, I'm tying those growth processes together and regressing them on a set of exogenous covariates, it's verging on ridiculous to say, what is the power of that? Is it a power of a mean, a variance? Is it a power of a set of covariates? Is it an omnibus test for the entire growth model? We have really well-developed ways of calculating all of these, but that's my feeling, is I feel like we should move to a trichotomous power where you have low, medium, or high power. Your study is designed where, you might find an effect, you'll likely find an effect, or I doubt you'll find an effect. Because I feel like saying I have a power of 0.82 for my multivariate growth model is just not only useless, but it's disingenuous.
I am with you. And let me add a little bit of both personal and methodological color commentary, if I may. All right. So when I was in grad school, although I knew what power was because I shaded the right region in the curve, right, the classic sort of diagram, it didn't really hit home for me until I was an assistant professor. And I was in my first faculty position, and I was attending one of these things that as a senior faculty member, you probably never attend. It was an all-university research gala or something, right? So where one presenter will talk about symbolism in Dante's Inferno, and then the next presenter will talk about urban planning for people with visual impairments, and the next person will. So it's just so varied; it could not possibly hold the interest of anybody for more than 2 presentations. So, but I attended one of these because I thought I was supposed to. And a faculty member from, I don't remember the exact name of the department, but we'll call it animal sciences. There were large gloves involved in that field, whatever it was. And so they talked about a study where they wanted to feed pigs this special diet that would make, essentially bigger, better bacon. But they were concerned that the diet might have a side effect of clouding the cornea of the pigs. And so it would impair their vision while they're getting...
So we wouldn't want to impair their vision before we put a nail gun to their head.
That's
Okay.
Oh my God, is that how it's done? I didn't know.
Okay.
Anyway, wow. So
It's good they care. I mean,
Okay.
it's nice that they care. But go ahead.
Yeah. So they presented some their research, and they had a control group of pigs and a treatment group of pigs, normal, pig chow versus the super duper pig chow, and then in the end, they were so happy to report that after they euthanized the pigs and they measured the degree of corneal clouding, that there was no difference in the corneal clouding. And so they were all in on the, super duper pig chow. And I'm sitting there and it's really bothering me. And I'm not an agitator. I'm not the kind of person who asks questions to be that guy. But it was just really gnawing at me. And so I raised my hand just for a point of clarification. And I said, I didn't see how many pigs you had in each group. Could you just remind us of how many pigs you had in each group? And it hadn't been on their slide. And they go, oh, we had 6 pigs in the treatment group and 6 pigs in the control group. I said, okay, thank you. And so I got to, a little bit of mental calculating. And the effect size that they would have had to have a significant result would have had to have been so big that essentially the pigs would have been bumping into the walls. The pigs would have had little seeing eye dogs in their sty. And to me, it meant the entire study was useless, and that it was a waste, and it was a waste that was tangible to me in the sense that, these pigs were euthanized for a study that had no shot whatsoever. And so that really bothered me, and it made me buy into the idea of power analysis. So I like the idea. I like where Cohen's head was back in the 60s and a lot of stuff that was done since then. But the point that you make is spot on. And that is that it's not all about a delta. Most of what we do cannot be reduced to a single value that characterizes a study. And even if we go back to Cohen and we think about, let's imagine that Elwood is doing a regression. Are we talking about the power of the R squared to detect a significant R squared? Because that's what Cohen tends to emphasize. Or are we talking about the power to detect a significant predictor among a set of other predictors? Okay, well, that's a little bit more complicated, and that's only a regression model. Imagine a model with 2 predictors, and I want to detect whether or not one of those predictors is significant. That sounds like an easy enough task, and that everything is characterized by a single effect size, like a beta weight. The problem is that the power associated with detecting that one predictor depends on how strongly that predictor is related to the other predictor, and how predictive that other predictor is of your outcome. And that's just a regression model with 2 predictors. When you start thinking about HLM models or your big old growth models or all that, you cannot see all of those things. And many of them matter. There's a line in one of my favorite songs that says, your crystal ball ain't so crystal clear. And that's exactly how I feel about power analysis, that you will never be able to specify the entire context around the things that you care about. And the context can matter so much that it's not even just your 0.82 that's disingenuous when you talk about power. I mean, it could be a pretty decent range of what your power is. And I don't, when I do power analysis with people, which by the way is like 90% therapy, right? You sit there and go, how do you feel about this path? Do you think it's big? What if it's small? Could you live with it being small? Do you want to? I mean, you really have to. I refer to it as a seance almost, because you have to try and channel the spirits to inform you as to what all the characteristics are. In the end, it's laughable, because even when you identify the parameters you care about, you manipulate the context around that, and there's so much fuzz. So I'm not gonna go full hyperbole like you did, which I liked, to say post hoc or a priori power analysis is useless. But I will say I don't really know how to do it anymore. I can do all the mechanics of it. I can do the math of it. I can simulate it. I can do all of that stuff. But I don't know in the end that I trust much of anything that I get out.
And that is actually how I feel. I was just trying to start with an interesting premise. I do think, I will back off a little bit that it's useless, but I do think as a field, and particularly in grant review, I've been at the table in grant review. I have, written power sections for colleagues. I've been fortunate to have a whole lot of my, my own R01s, and so I've received these kind of critiques. And here, I don't feel like I'm being hyperbolic, as I think grant panels are applying principles from 1968 to research in 2019. And I think we need to change that. I think the notion of just take even a simple growth model. Don't even go nuts. As say you have 5 repeated measures, pretend you're doing it in a structural equation model. So you have 5 indicators on a latent factor. You have an intercept, a linear slope, and you want to know what is the power of that. Well, first, it goes back to my point of power of what? Are you looking for the mean of the slope factor, the variance of the slope factor? I've seen argued in the literature the covariance between the intercept and the slope factor is what's most important. And so you have all of these kind of things, but at the same time, as you know, and you've actually written about some of this yourself, is, the power of the test differs on the communality estimates on the repeated measures. So that's kind of the multiple R square of each repeated measure in factor analysis, just in an ongoing quest of the field of quantitative trying to confuse people and to keep you buying expensive textbooks. Is you take the same concept and rename it things so it seems something completely different. In factor analysis, the explained variance in an indicator is called a communality. It's really just a multiple R squared. That's literally all it is of the total variability that's observed in the measure, what proportion can be explained by the underlying factor structure, and then whatever is left is the residual. Well, it's been known for decades that the power of the test increases the higher your R squared is for the indicator. So again, it goes back to, all right, so what is the power of that test? Well, there's a range of things. And what I would like to see, and this would help me, if I were a reviewer, so I'm not on a standing review panel, but I do ad hoc reviews. What I would like to see when I review is, it kind of goes back to your pig example, is I just want to know, does your alternative hypothesis have a fighting chance given the design of your study that you're proposing? I don't need to know that power is 0.821. First, never report power to the third digit. I don't think you should report it to the second digit. And on some days, I don't think you should report it to the first digit.
No,
but it
should be like the robins, the sparrows, and the ostriches or something. We just need these nice qualitative levels.
Exactly. Do you have a smiley face? We should do emojis. Right. Oh my God. Power analysis by emoji.
You heard it here.
Do you have a big smile, or do you have a flat line? I don't know what it's called, but a flat line smile, or a sad face. I think all of power, your entire section on an R01 could be section C.1 power analysis and one emoji for the entire study.
And I think you really should limit the emojis that people could choose from.
Oh, you get 3.
Okay.
You get 3. Okay. And if you go over the $500,000 cap per year and get permission from NIH, you can add the eggplant and the little poop emoji. So if you have a multi-site kind of intervention trial, you can go to 5.
Wow.
Yep.
The poop emoji.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep.
I think that sums it up perfectly. Really it does. It's about as good as it gets. And there's a standard error associated with the face, but who cares?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, no standard errors, no confidence intervals, no verbiage. I don't want to see any text. Greg, you and I have built a career in writing paragraphs that are academically and intellectually engaging and apparently impressive that convey nothing, that convey no useful information, is taken together.
Wait.
Yeah?
Okay, that's fair.
I was going to say, you can't possibly. I've read your papers. You have read my papers. I'm not saying all of our work, but to write a sentence of the form, taken together, we have designed a study in a way not previously conducted that will lead to innovative findings in a novel and rigorous framework to move the field forward in a way not previously possible. Okay, I got tenured on crap like that.
Wow.
Yes.
That was impressive.
No standard errors, no confidence intervals, no text. I just want section C.1 power, and I want a single emoji, and that's all you're allowed. Now, unfortunately, Elwood at the University of Chicago hung up, which is kind of odd because he sent an
hanged
email.
himself.
Well,
hanged himself.
You know, and he has revised and resubmitted his paper, and
it has since been accepted.
Now tenured. I have to admit, we did wander off the farm a little bit. But anyway, Elwood, I don't know if that's of any utility at all. It's actually a topic for a prior episode is, do you want to do that anyway for the sake of the reviewer, and you just kind of lean into the pitch and take your base, you do what you need to do to get a paper out there, or do you take a stand and say you're not going to compute power because of, the reasons that we articulated? That's a topic for another day. But
let me ask you this then. Just sort of wrapping it up and coming back to Elwood's question. Now you're in Elwood's position, and you have to respond to the reviewer. I know we have this belief system about the futility, certainly the futility of post hoc power analysis. How do you say that to the reviewer in a way that you think will be fruitful?
How about if I give a short answer and we put a pin in this one as discussion for a future episode about how do you respond to reviewers?
That's a lovely idea.
Because I feel two ways. One is I'm a very pragmatic guy. And if the reviewer wants post hoc power analysis, then I will do post hoc power analysis even though I don't believe it.
To 3 decimals.
If not 4, and because I don't see this as a mechanism, as a teachable moment. So if I were in my office and a graduate student came in and said, should I do this, for my master's? And I might talk for half an hour about the things that we, just talked about because, maybe there's some, kind of opportunity to think more carefully about these issues. In a response to an editor, I might just say, we following the recommendation of reviewer number 2, we computed the power and found this to be 0.58. And then what I might do is I still stand, I'm pretty flexible in trying to respond to reviewers, but in the paper itself, your name is on that for eternity. And so, what I might say is if I don't believe that really helps, I might say in the editorial letter that I calculated this, but, given concerns that we just articulated, I might put a sentence in as saying, we chose to not report this in the manuscript. And so that's what I might do. But
I like that. And I like the idea of putting a pin in that topic and talking more about how to manage reviewers. That's a nice idea.
All right, so let's see. All right, Elwood, I don't know if that's any use or not. Good luck with that and good luck with the manuscript. Maybe shoot us an email after the smoke clears and let us know what happened, because it'd be
What
interesting.
email would a person use, Patrick?
Why, what an interesting thing to ask. Is to have an email address, we would actually need a web page, wouldn't we?
Okay.
Well,
actually,
we wouldn't. That's not technically correct.
Okay.
All right, so we do have a webpage. As of now, it is absolutely bare bones, but we are at quantitudethepodcast.org. And if you want to contact either of us, it's just our last name, so Hancock at quantitudethepodcast.org or Curran at quantitudethepodcast.org. And so if you have a question that you're interested in and want to hear us prattle on endlessly about, shoot us a line. And Elwood is use the same address you used before, but let us know. It'd be interesting to know what happened. So, Greg, I am looking out the window, and I am afraid that the leaf blowing guy is going to come back at any moment. So this might be a good place to wrap up. Thank you for your valuable time that you will never get back for listening to us. We very much appreciate that. And Greg, any parting shots?
No, just thanks to your mom for hanging with us.
Thanks, Mom. Give me a quick impersonation of my Irish mother as our exit point.
Patrick, get your mummy some smokes.
There we go. Sorry, Mom, he did it. I can't control him. All right, everybody, take care, and we'll talk to you again.
I like your brother better. You've been listening to Quantitude, the podcast that even anti-vaxxers wish there was a vaccine for. Today's episode was brought to you by the software suite R, for those who are already intolerably self-righteous and are looking for that last final push. And by the Type 2 Error, workhorse of social scientists everywhere. And by the PP plot, whose name is way funnier than the QQ plot.